Hey, everybody. Welcome to another fantastic episode. This is the greatest podcast in all of Utah high school basketball history. I don't know if you know that or not. It still is the only one, and rightly so. But I got a little jealous, some big brother jealousy, because I kept hearing my sister Krysten appearing on like KSL. You're now part of the Locked On Network, and you're on. And I'm like, huh, I guess I just have this silly little podcast that you don't even think to reach out about and come on. So I'm excited to talk about Utah. Some basketball is happening in Utah. We've had a lot happening here. And just for you to tell people about what you're doing and what you'll be covering this weekend. Does that sound like a fun situation?
Yeah, the number one thing is you are my savior for next year in terms of covering the 2026 draft. Everyone's like, oh, you left Utah too soon. AJ DeBonsa is at BYU. And I think or you texted me. One of us texted each other right away. I'm like, the guest room available? Am I still available to come? Me and Gary, can we come stay with you for an extended period of time, please?
I'm mostly excited about Gary. I'm not gonna lie. I miss that little guy, and it was the hardest part about you going down to Vegas. But it's also great for you to be in Vegas. Is Gary there? Is he going to make an appearance?
Gary is right at my feet. He can make an appearance if we need to.
It's fine. I'll record one with Gary while you're out covering somebody, and I'll just hold him up and he'll have his paws on my shoulder, and we'll just do a whole episode with Gary and Adam. It's gonna be great.
Great.
Well, so before we talk about all the fun news, because we've got a great event happening this weekend here with Winter Hoopfest down at Lehigh. It's happening. It's actually going on today. I think it even had some games yesterday, even, but mostly today and tomorrow. So we'll talk a little bit about that. But you have gone through not a career change, but you have a job change. You were with Yahoo. Now you're doing a whole bunch of stuff. So I know what's new in the world of KP, but why don't you just tell the dozens of listeners to this podcast what you got going on?
I am calling high school games for NBA TV, the NBA app. It's the NBA Future Starts Now. So they have the NBA Cup here in Las Vegas. And so there's 7 or 8 games that I'm calling over a 3 or 4 day time span. And so when you were like, hey, come jump on my podcast, let's talk about games, I thought we were talking about those games. I didn't realize we were talking about the games in Utah, which when you started rattling off the teams that are going to be there, I'm like, oh yeah, we can talk about Koa Pete. We can obviously talk about AJ DeBonsa and, Duncanville that's going to be there. Obviously Beckham Black, Anthony Black's little brother. So yeah, I'm happy to talk about all of it. Yes.
How excited were you, though, to see Trae Young rolling the dice at Madison Square Garden? Did you see that clip when they, speaking of the NBA Cup, when he found out he's going to be coming to Vegas? Have you seen this?
Yes. No, I saw it.
Trae's dribbling the clock out, and he's just rolling the dice at center court. And I was like, Trae Young is the owner of the New York Knicks. He lives rent free in their heads, and I think it's awesome. And by the way, his dad is a tremendous person to follow on Twitter. I don't know what it is.
Ray Young is fantastic. And by the way, can we also mention that your younger sister, aka me, beat Trae in Around the World in a 3-point contest when he was a high schooler at USA Basketball. I made him shoot left-handed, and then
like, you got to tell me the trick
and I made him shoot left-handed. And then when he lost, he's like, let's run it back. And I said, no, I'm retired. I beat Trae Young in a shooting contest. And Michael Porter Jr. was standing right there. He's like, oh no, I'm out, KP. I'm not shooting left-handed. But man. That is
they're like best friends. I don't think many people realize
they are best friends. Yes.
Yeah, they're great. And I will say, MPJ's podcast, surprisingly, Curious Mike, surprisingly entertaining. Because I've heard Mike do interviews. I'm like, but he's great on the podcast. I think he's got some great guests on there. I've really enjoyed it. There was another. Who was the Alabama running back? Didn't you beat somebody in like a game of one-on-one?
Yes. Oh my gosh.
What was his
I'm
name?
looking at his picture right now in my little collage. Adam, why
I'm
can't I
so
remember
sorry.
his name? Why can't I?
This
And I
was like
picked him up. I picked him up when he was with the Cowboys. He got drafted to the Cowboys. I picked him up and a wide receiver teammate, and we went to Nobu. And I was like, "Who's paying?" And he goes, "Me. I'm paying." And we went there. And the only reason that he took me to Nobu is because he's like, we want to know what to order when we bring, sorry, mom, fine ass bitches out for dinner. And I was like, oh, okay. So I'll tell you what to order at Nobu. Like, it's fine. Yes, I
sorry,
did beat
sorry,
him
sorry,
in
mom.
one-on-one. Sorry, mom.
Let's see here. I'm looking at the Alabama running backs. I can't remember what the
Bo
guy's.
Scarborough.
Bo
Bo Scarborough.
Scarborough. That's right, Bo Scarborough. Um, well, that's better than most people. My favorite thing to do, speaking of events that come to Utah, is I am not a shy person, and I talk to everybody. And at these events, I have my little media pass because of this silly little podcast, and I love the look on people's faces when I'm like, "Hey, I'm Adam Peek. My little sister is Krysten Peek," and they're like, "Oh, KP, JP's your little sister? Oh man, she." And then they just start telling stories after stories, and then I say nothing, and I say it was great to meet you, and I leave. Like I have nothing else to add to the conversation at
No,
all.
I told you, Adam. So like Utah Prep came out here in Las Vegas. I left the Alabama Oregon championship game at the Players Era tournament. I left that game early to go watch Utah Prep blow out some team by 40 points. And the very first thing that AJ DeBonsa, the number one player in high school, said after the game was like, "Hey, yo, KP, I met your brother." I'm
That's
like,
right.
I know you
I got a
did.
selfie with Ace. He was like, he's like, "Wait, you're KP's older brother?" I was like, "Yeah." He beats out his phone. He's like,
I
I was
know.
like,
I
"Hi."
know. He sent it right to me. You were like, "Hey, I met AJ. He said you're his favorite reporter." I was like, "Yeah,
Oh
he
my
told
gosh.
me." You're like, I took a selfie with Ace. I was like, "Yeah, he sent it to me."
Yeah, it's uh it's a crazy world. And now you're on with is it Raphael? Is that who's the
Rafael Barlow, yes, for
yeah,
Locked On. Yep.
he's great. Sorry, Raphael. I had never listened to your Locked On podcast until KP joined. It's great. You guys have great dialogue. I've really enjoyed it. Honestly, it's been because it's different than other podcasts, I feel like, and that's why I really appreciated the Locked On. I really only listen to the Locked On Nuggets podcast because of the whole Nuggets thing. But I just like that it's independent journalism and you can sort of tell it how it is, and you guys do an awesome job with that. So is that daily? I mean, how often are you guys making these
Twice
podcasts?
a week, Tuesday and Thursday. Yeah, and I told you like I was on the phone with Ace Tabonsa this morning early because he's like, someone sent me this podcast, and I just appreciate your reporting because it's honest and
Mhm.
it's true, and you're not out there for like clickbait, and you know what's going on. And I'm like, I'm trying to fight the good fight here, but I
Yeah.
appreciate you saying that. I didn't like when he said, he's like, "Hey, I listen to your podcast." I'm like, "Oh my God, what is he
What did I
saying?
say?
What did I say? What did I say?" I don't know what I said.
You did say that Queen got the glow up. So that was my favorite part of
Yeah,
it.
Derek Queen. He has a glow up. Yes.
But the fact that you use that phrase with Derek Queen, just I was like, it was perfect. It was fantastic. Okay, so we got this event here, and I want to talk about your silly event in Vegas with whoever is going to be there. But that's not in Utah. This isn't the Vegas basketball podcast. So we got this Hoop Fest coming in here, and it's not. I don't think it's not nearly as loaded as the one that we had previous around Thanksgiving. And that is, I think we've had because last year we had Cooper Flag. I think the year before that was when was Paolo Banchero here? It
2
was
years, 2 years before.
yeah.
Remember,
Um,
because he flew in and he only played the second half.
yeah, that was and he dominated. He was just
Yeah.
like showed up, put on his clothes, came in for the second half, and just destroyed everybody, and then went home. Which is kind of what he's doing to the NBA prior. He's injured now, though, isn't he? I feel like he got injured this year. Either way.
Uh,
But I remember watching, it was Jaden Hardy and
Frankie
who
Collins.
Frankie Collins,
Yes.
yeah.
Shaden
And
Sharp played in that. Yes.
he
Yeah,
did?
he did.
Wow. I don't remember him. But I just remember
And
Jaden Hardy.
also Kylan Boswell, Jared McCain, they all played in it as well.
Jeez. We've had a lot of good, really good players coming through here. So this weekend, today, and then there's a bunch of games tomorrow starting at about 4:00. There's a lot of guys to go out and see. So we've got the 4:30 game tomorrow is Timpview versus Harvard Westlake. These guys played at Section 7. It was a good game. I think Harvard Westlake won, but not by much. Dean Ruckert had an incredible game, and I'm excited to go down and watch Dean and Nick Kamina. I think it's Kamina is how you say his last name, who I watched play on the Pro 16 circuit, and I thought he was the best player in the circuit, to be totally candid. I don't remember where. Do you remember where he's going? I can look this up. Where he's committed to, or if he's even committed. I'm not sure. But tell me.
Isn't he committed to Duke?
I think so. But let's see. I have the internet, and I'm going to look this up. But is there anybody else at Harvard Westlake that we should be like, oh yeah, but you got to check out this, because kids, and you are scouting, I feel like, and know players that are in like the 2028 class that nobody knows about. Your story about Cooper Flagg and seeing him play at like U15 is crazy. So I always feel like people. And by the way, listening to you call a game on the NBA app, I was like, do you have a teleprompter in front of you? But you just like know stuff about people.
I can't like, Adam, you know me, like I have no life outside of basketball and Gary. And so the fact that like someone is going to pay me to sit on a broadcast and talk about these prospects that I already know and that I already have stories for is crazy to me. But I'm very, very thankful. And I will be calling 8 games, including a girls game. I'm calling the Sierra Canyon and Coronado girls game tomorrow night, my first girls game for the EYBL Scholastic League and the NBA Cup here in Las Vegas. But and we're talking about Harvard Westlake. It's so funny because
he's going to Duke, by the way. Committed to Duke.
Nick is definitely the guy, and he has been the guy. And then when we look at this NBA draft cycle and we look at Nate Hinton, who is committed to Harvard, who played at Harvard Westlake, and he's kind of like he's popping a little bit. Like you're getting questions. I'm getting questions about him from NBA scouts. And it's like, oh my gosh, he did play at Harvard Westlake. Like I cannot even remember him, because you're always focused on Nick. And then you hear about Nate Hinton and he's like, oh, his parents graduated from Harvard Law and his dream school was always Harvard. And he had offers from UCLA, USC, Georgia Tech, whatever. And he's like, no, I'm going to go to Harvard. And that's awesome. For all you kids out there, like it doesn't matter where you go, NBA scouts will find you. But Nick is the dude there at Harvard Westlake. And, he struggled a little bit at USA Basketball. We saw him at the training camp in October and he struggled. But he is going to be just fine. He's so skilled in the pick and pop. He has the height, the length, not necessarily super athletic, but everything to kind of, covet when you want a shooter for Duke at the next level.
I really appreciated something I thought was a bit under that I wasn't expecting actually from his game, was his decision making as a ball handler in the pick and roll. Because him and the kid going to BYU, Xavion
Stanton, yeah.
They played together, and there would be Nick was the guy, like at the end of the game with the ball in his hands, making decisions out of the pick and roll, making decisions in space, and elite. Like I thought, like one of the highest IQ players I've seen. So I'm excited to go watch him. The game after that KP, is Duncanville versus Utah Prep. This is the second year in a row that Duncanville is here. Last year they lost to Orem and in a really, really hard fought game. They're playing Orem tonight, actually, and then they get Utah Prep tomorrow. So we can talk about Utah Prep, and let's do that. But like, how good is Beckham? But he's a sophomore. He's a sophomore this year. Has he made a jump from his freshman to sophomore year? It seems like he has.
I think so. I mean, we saw him kind of have a moment at USA Basketball for the training camp there. And people that don't understand or don't know, the USA Basketball training camp in October, where they invite 85, 87 players out across freshman, sophomore, junior, and senior year. It's very, very instrumental. It's a big event if you're a younger kid, a freshman and sophomore, because it is the first time that NBA scouts and executives are there being able to see you and kind of get that benchmark evaluation. So anytime a player like Beckham Black, Marcus Spears Jr., who plays at Dynamic Prep, Jermaine O'Neal's team, he was amazing. So anytime that you can get that sort of exposure, and by the way, it's not just like NBA scouts that are there. There were 4 GMs that were there, right? It was Sam Presti from OKC. It was Sean Marks from the Brooklyn Nets. It was Calvin Booth from the Denver Nuggets.
The 2023 world champion Denver Nuggets.
Yes. And I'm blanking on, I don't know if Jeff Peterson was there from Charlotte. I can't remember the fourth, but these are heavy hitters that come to this event, so it is if you play well there, then you are on an NBA scout and an NBA team's radar.
And I think it's also helpful for even the kids who don't play well, because it's not helpful for them in their, necessarily for like their immediate NBA. They're not on their radar. But let's say you go to this event and you struggle because either you've been, just always the guy or whatever it is. And now this is maybe some of your first exposure to that level of pressure and competition. If you're a freshman or a sophomore, what an amazing opportunity to learn and to see and to know what you have to do. And I'll give you an example. Talking about Utah Prep, the growth that I've seen in Anthony Falesi's game, since he was a sophomore, and I would tune in, I would watch some of these camps, and like, it was a big adjustment for him, I think, coming from like a public school in Orem and then having to go out on that stage. And now I watch him and his motor is always going. He's grabbing offensive rebounds. His shot is improving. His ball handling is improving. And I'm like, that even if he didn't always have the greatest showings at these things, for the right players, it's going to motivate them. And I think that I've seen a lot of that with Anthony Falesi, to be honest with you. He's a kid who is improving every day. And how can you not improve if you have to go and guard AJ DeBonsa at practice? Like, if you have to see, and he is a competitive dude, AJ is, right? Like, you're going to get better. So we can talk a little about Utah Prep, and have you called any of their games yet? I know you've seen them
No,
play.
I'm calling their game when they play at the Hoop Hall West in like January 3rd, I think, is when I'm calling their game. But I've seen enough to know enough about the talent on that
100%.
team.
By the way, they did beat you, and Raphael were talking about. I am almost positive that they won the game against Columbus. That was
in Vegas.
That was on ESPN. They lost the one in San Diego.
Okay, and then they won the one.
Yeah,
I couldn't remember, honestly. All I remember is like AJ put on one of the singular greatest performances, in terms of what he was doing, shot creation, defense, passing. Like, it was incredible. It doesn't even matter to me if they won the game or not, because he was
incredible. He was incredible in both games. But Utah Prep, they have a kid from New Zealand who's a junior named Jackson Kiss. And it was the first time I had seen him play. And he came in and had to guard the Boozer twins. and held his own. And he's somebody who I think is at least on the Utah prep scene, is a kid who's took that and is really progressing, growing. And that's what's cool about a school like Utah Prep, right? Is somebody from New Zealand can come in unheralded, show up on ESPN, and all of a sudden have a great game. And it's like, oh,
Who's
look at,
this kid? Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So AJ, obviously the big news here is that he signed with BYU. Utah, you don't have to go through everything, because I think everyone should tune into the podcast you did on Locked On and hear about it. But how close was it? It was not a sure thing. Like, everyone here is like, well, everyone knew he was going to go to BYU. And I'm like, I don't think it was like an absolute 100%, like he's going to Utah Prep, he's going to BYU. That's what some of the local people are making. Somebody sent me a story that was like, AJ DeBonsa says he won't go to any other team but the Utah Jazz, and he's going to stay at BYU if he doesn't get drafted by the Jazz. And I'm like, I think that's a load. I think he'll get drafted and he'll go play and he'll be excellent wherever he goes. That's my personal feelings. But how close was it really to I'm going to guess either Alabama or North Carolina? It feels like once Darren Peterson went to Kansas, it was going to be between those three schools.
I mean, I don't know personally, like the day to day, to the week, but when I talked to the BYU staff, when I talked to the coaches, when we were sitting there watching AJ DeBonsa play, they were in the dark. They didn't know what his decision was going to be a week, 2 weeks later. You know what I mean? So if we're talking about, oh, it was a done deal as soon as he went to Utah Prep, I don't think that's the case. I've said this before. I think, Utah Prep is trying to be a feeder system. They're trying to be a feeder program to Utah-based schools, and that's fine. Like JJ Mandaquit, he went to Washington. Like it wasn't automatic to BYU, to Utah, to Weber State, whatever. But I think that's what they're trying to do. And the fact that they were in the mix, we all knew that BYU was in the mix in the summer. I don't think it was a done deal until it was a done deal.
Yeah.
Like you said, I think Darren Peterson going to Kansas, they were out, they were off the table, especially when we saw Darren Peterson and AJ square off and how competitive it was. It's like, oh no, these two are not, they're not going to be teammates. They are not going to be teammates. But Alabama rolling 2 coaches and 3 players deep to one of his games here in Vegas, that was very positive for Alabama. The fact that they said, listen, look how we utilized Brandon Miller. He was a number 2 pick. We see a lot of similarities in your game and Brandon Miller's game. Like, we'd love to utilize you the same way. But kudos to Kevin Young, the way that he has just completely come in and he's changed everything at BYU. He's making it more of a pro style offense. You go to practice and he has NBA coaches, ex-NBA coaches. He himself coached in the NBA. It's run like an NBA style practice. And I think that's appealing not only to players, but to scouts and NBA executives that come through and see, their players that are projected towards the top of the draft.
Yeah, for sure. By the way, I realized I just led you astray. Koa Pete's high school is here, but it's the girls' team. So we don't. You can talk about Koa Pete. I just looked. I was like, wait a second. The purple says girls' game, and the white says boys' game. Yeah, I think that what BYU is doing is incredibly impressive. I tried to get season tickets this year. I'm not a BYU fan. I'm not, obviously we're not from here, but I've heard the environment is
it's insane.
Crazy.
It's insane.
Yes. And with the move to the Big 12, I just think it's going to get more and more and more. It's just going to be big. And basketball, for those of you who don't know this, if you're listening to this, you're not a fan of Utah basketball or from Utah, thank you for finding this. You probably found it because of my sister. But basketball is a huge deal here. Like there's an indoor basketball court on nearly every street corner in a church, and you probably know somebody who has keys. So kids grow up. It's really the only professional game in town. There's hockey, but this is the first year. There's MLS, but that's not the level, right? Like the Jazz sort of run it, and then you have football with BYU and Utah. But like BYU becoming a national like contending powerhouse if they can keep the momentum going. AJ is going to be one and done, but if they can keep it going, man, it's gonna continue to it'll elevate the game here, and I think it'll continue to elevate, even bringing in kids to like Wasatch Academy, who's playing this weekend, and we can talk about we talk about them. Junior counties picked up a bunch of offers. Isaiah Harwell's back and is getting back into shape, and he's certainly putting on some pretty good performances. But it seems like the Wasatches and the Utah Preps, and even up north at Layton Christian Academy, they recently went independent. They've got Tyron Jones, who's a UNLV signee, is there. I can just see these programs picking up more and more momentum if BYU can continue what they're doing. Have you been able to see Isaiah Harwell play since his injury?
I did. I saw him. Well, he came to USA Basketball. I saw him also at. He didn't play at USA Basketball, but he played at. It was like the Wooten Camp here in Vegas that I just happened to drop in for a day because I was out here looking at houses. Yeah, he looks. I mean, he's obviously he's headed to Houston next year. Also with Kingston Flemings. And he's someone that like I think I'm higher on than a lot of people, but his injury definitely has, set him back a little bit. He doesn't have that burst that he had off the wing. He's settling into his 3-point jump shot. He needs to add some more physicality to his game, and that'll all come. Like Kelvin Sampson. Kelvin Sampson is a dude, Adam. Okay, in Vegas, you are either going up or going down to the court, and there's escalators and then there's the stairs. And every time I saw Kelvin Sampson, he was taking the stairs. He refused to take the escalator. And I'm like, this dude, he's different. You go to a practice at Houston and it's just run. Like I have anxiety watching it. That's how hard these kids practice. That's how hard this is run. And that's what he expects from these players. So I don't have any sort of, reservations on what sort of player Isaiah is going to be. I think he's going to be just fine at the University of Houston.
Yeah, I love the program they run there. Which practice gives you more anxiety to watch? Buzz Williams at A&M or Kelvin Sampson at Houston?
Okay, preseason A&M practices give me so much anxiety, and I'm watching them at I told you this, the first time I went at 5:30 in the morning, and I was just sitting there. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is the worst thing. I cannot even believe that these poor kids have to go through this. And then Buzz is like, all right, well, KP, come lift with us. And I had to go work out with his staff. He's the only coach in the history of college basketball that has ever been like, well, you're going to work out, right? And I'm like, yeah, I guess. I don't know.
I loved when he said on an interview when they were like, somebody asked him when he's going to retire. And he said, when somebody can bench more than me. And he was like, wait a second. You mean the players can't bench more than you? And he's like, it's not even close or something.
He just goes, he's like, that's right.
That's right. Yeah.
Right. He's the best.
He's great. Yeah, that actually it warmed my heart when speaking of Wasatch, when I saw Junior County got an offer to A&M, I was like,
yeah,
I saw him at the Hoopfest event around Thanksgiving, and I was like, dude, congrats on the A&M offer. I'm like, I worked a little bit with Buzz Williams. Like, he is an incredible. He's crazy, but he's an incredible person. Like, he is genuine. He's authentic. So I'm rooting for the Aggies for sure. Well, that's kind of some of the teams we got here down in Lehigh. So if you're listening to this tonight, go take some time tomorrow. Go check them out. If you can get down there tonight as well, it should be a great event. But it sounds like there's also some cool things happening about 6 hours down I-15. And so you'll be covering the games on NBA TV. Who are you most excited to watch this weekend?
Krysten Peek and Link Academy are going to be out here. Also, Long Island Lutheran. So that's Kyan Anthony and the Mingo brothers, Caden and Dylan. And I love anytime I ever see Kyan Anthony, I talk to you about this, Adam. It's like Carmelo is always there. And it was one of those things where it's just like, I respect people that are in the gym constantly, and it doesn't matter what event it is. It doesn't matter if there's cameras around or if it's on TV. Like Carmelo is there. Like he was at the Wooten camp, for God's sakes. Like nobody's at the Wooten camp, and he's just there in the corner. He's obviously there at USA Basketball. And during USA Basketball at the training camp, like I did an interview with Kyan, and then his bodyguard, because of course he has a bodyguard, was
Right.
like, "Oh, we gotta go." And then I see 2 hours later, the reason that they had to like rush the interview was because they went to the CU game, and Carmelo and Kyan were on the field, pregame and everything. So it's always good to catch up with them. Obviously, we're going to have Sierra Canyon, and Bryce James is back. He's been hurt, and Bryce Cofield as well, the other Bryce. So it'll be good to see them, and good to catch that game, and kind of just get a benchmark for their senior season and how these players are developing.
What do you think? Because you mentioned a lot of like former NBA players, kids, and it seems like more and more and more. Bryce James just had his first 30-point game in the G League, which, by the way, can everybody just shut up about
Bronny James?
I'm sorry, Bronny James. Yeah. Bronny James had his first 30-point game, and it made me want to just tell everybody who was just like, oh, he was only drafted in the second round because his dad. I'm like, no, he's pretty good at basketball. He had a great. You've documented this, right? Like he had a great run at McDonald's All-American game. His combine was awesome. Did it help that his dad wanted to be in the Lakers? Of course it did. But like to act like the kid hasn't, that he's like me, like a 5'10", 150-pound kid who just got drafted because dad was there is crazy. He is a G League level player, which most second round guys are. And he's showing it, and I'm here for it all. Like I loved all of it. But do you have, so you've got like Gilbert Arenas' son, I think just reclassed to 2025,
Elijah,
right?
yep.
Taj
Ariza.
I was going to say, Carmelo, Bryce James, like you've got all these guys.
Boozer twins, yeah.
Boozer twins. Is there any, let's set aside the Boozer twins because I think that they're probably the obvious answer. Or we can include the Boozer twins. Of all of these kind of former NBA players, is there one that you're just like, or a couple that you're just like, either like, I think they're going to be like a surefire first round, like lottery pick, or, like, it just seems like there's so many of these kids who are coming up now, and we've never really had this.
Yeah.
Scottie Pippen's kid was probably the first one, but he wasn't even really talked about that much. And now he's the first father-son to ever have a triple-double in an NBA game or something like that when he did it with Memphis.
And he did it against the Bulls, which was in Chicago, which was awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy.
I will say this. I think that there is this stigma between the legacy players and the legacy kids, and NBA teams are starting to catch on. And they're looking at what Scottie Pippen Jr. is doing and how productive he is now as a pro after going 3-4 years, in college at Vanderbilt, was leading the SEC in scoring, and he's not that big. And so when you look at him and you look at the Boozers and you look at Kyan Anthony, you have to kind of put into your mind, like, okay, they have the blueprint. They have this secret blueprint because their fathers have been in the league, and they've either been in the gym constantly with their dad or with other NBA players. Like, I remember Justin Pippen, who is now at Michigan, who blew up the last minute his senior year. He played at Sierra Canyon, and I was like, and he didn't play any AAU basketball. And I was like, JP, like, what happened? Like, where did this come from? And he's like, I don't know. I was just in the gym all summer with my dad, my brother, and Devin Booker. Like, it was no big deal. And all of a sudden he becomes a master in the pick and roll and a 3-point jumper. So like, you can never discredit these legacy kids. I think we're seeing more and more of them kind of dip into the well of knowledge of their father and other players. And just with social media, you have that capability to be in the gym with whoever at whatever time during whenever in the spring or summer. And that's what you're seeing from these teams. Like, I saw an interview where it was Taj Ariza was like, yeah, I was on my way to school, and then all of a sudden I heard there was a Kevin Durant run, and
Yeah.
I grabbed my shoes and I went and I played against Kevin Durant. It's like, what world are we in that is just normal?
That's just
Like
normal,
that,
right?
yeah, but that doesn't happen unless you have the last name that these kids have. So they are getting the experience and the exposure that other players don't necessarily get.
And, and the money, honestly, is a huge part, is a huge help, right? Like NBA players today and even the generation just barely before are signing much bigger contracts. They have more endorsement deals than like when Pippen and Jordan were playing. We forgot probably the most impactful player to come in whose dad played in the NBA, and that's Steph Curry. So, like he kind of had the he had a blueprint, right, with his dad, and they execute and they talk about it, like pulling him out of AAU and getting him into training. So I think Steph was kind of the first to really do this. But yeah, it's been, to me, it's been really, really cool to watch because I grew up watching some of these players, and so now to see their kids do it, like hi Gary, I am 100% pulling for all of them. Like I think it's a really cool story, and I'm here for it. I think Gary's trying to say like, yo, you guys have been talking too long, and I can go outside. Well, hey, let's we can wrap it up here. Everyone go check out not only Hoopfest but also download the NBA app. It's okay, Gary. I got you. Download the NBA app. You can catch Krysten Peek there. You can catch her on Locked On Podcasts. And I would suggest just showing up in a random gym somewhere in the middle of Oklahoma in July, and she'll probably be there. She just lives in the gym.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, Gary, I will let you get back to hanging out with your mom. Thanks, Chris, for coming on. And
yeah, this is fun.
Now I can sleep well knowing that you came on my podcast, not just the KSL people. All right. See ya.